In 3, 2. So last week we talked about foster care and some of the problems with it and maybe some of the solutions surrounding it. This week we're going to talk about adoption, and this is really a part 1 and part 2. We're kind of carrying the whole train through. We're recording them back to back together because it is important to know there are some problems with adoption in America, and some of them are getting fixed right now. One of the worst things is barrier to entry. We're going to talk about that in a moment, but I'm excited. Jonathan Fiala, for you sitting in the chair of theology. Oh my gosh, I'm having a strong. To my left, I've got Justin today. How's it going, Justin?
It's going good. You know, the last recording went well. No strongs, but we're starting off strongs here.
Starting off strong here.
He's not the one that's supposed to be having seizures.
Yeah, well, it's you, Steve. You got Steve in the chair. You can hear his voice in the third chair of culture. How's it going?
I'm doing fantastic, John Arthur.
Yep. Yeah. Doing his little dance there. Yeah. No.
We don't dance.
I've been up. So it's now midday, and I've been up since 5 a.m. If I seem rattled, well, I was running a jackhammer earlier today because someone drove a semi where they shouldn't have.
Ooh, I
gotta
tell.
fix that. Yeah.
He's jacked
up. Yeah. Not since COVID. I lost 20 pounds of muscle, so I need to get that back. Anyway, moving on. So to adoption.
Is that table muscle or what?
So moving to adoption, go ahead, Mr. Producer, and I want to pull up this first story. So go ahead and get that ready, and go ahead and full screen that for us, if you would. So the question of adoption has always been one in my mind.
I could never go on vacation.
Cost, but I don't think it's the same anymore. Did that thing reset on you?
Yep.
Go ahead and mute it and run through the ad real quick. Mute that and run through the ad real quick for us while we talk about it. But one of the worst things about adoption has always been the cost. And typically, when you hear adoption, what do you think? Yeah. Just give me a number. Shout a number out.
Thousands.
Like 10,000?
Yeah, 10,000, 20,000.
I've heard up to $60,000 to adopt.
Yeah.
Right?
I know that had an aunt and an uncle that my uncle's done passed away by now, and they adopted one of my nieces, and she's in her 50s now, and it was and she was a baby then, and we're talking, you know,
how much was it?
Man, I don't know, but it was
tens of thousands.
Yeah, and this was
so. Go ahead and play the clip, Mr. Producer.
New family member can be a wonderful thing. We showed you this video earlier this week of newly formed families in Bastrop. This month is National Adoption Month. An organization want to bring awareness to the growing number of kids in Texas that still need permanent homes.
But a big concern we noticed people had is that adoption is costly. KVUE's Tori Larned joins us now in studio to clear this up. And Tori, it's more affordable than people think.
Yeah, I've heard people say it costs thousands of dollars to adopt, and technically, yes, it can if you adopt privately. But if you adopt through the state, it's no more than $300 to $400. That covers the court fees and any cost needed to get a license to adopt. So the rest of the money you'll spend is what you'd spend on any child in your family: clothes, food, activities, and putting a roof over their head. Now there's perks too. The child gets free health care and free in-state college tuition, and your family would get money back until the child turns 18.
Once an adoptive placement is made, the family will receive a monthly reimbursement, and that can range, depending on the child's needs and level of care that they have, between $400 to $500.
A nonprofit adoption service I spoke with says it gets expensive for families going through voluntary infant adoptions. This private service can cost anywhere between $25,000 to $40,000. That's when the adoptive family essentially works with the family putting the infant up for adoption, and it comes with a list of administrative care and legal fees. The department hopes by clearing this confusion up, more people will come to their informational meeting just to learn more, and then you can decide if adoption is the right move for your family. In studio, Tori Larned, KVUE News.
So that's not without strings. So
I could never go on vacation.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, you got to be quick. Those dang ads come out. That's not without its strings attached, but that is interesting.
And so it's really interesting to me because I hail from Washington originally.
How much is it there? You gonna pull it up for us real quick?
I have this. I looked it up.
Send this to the send this to the chat so we can put it in the description, please. If it's not there, you know whose fault it is. Anyway, go ahead.
I'll send it in the chat because apparently I don't have it written down here.
Okay.
Wow, I'm so good at this game.
What was the ballpark?
That's
But
all
it
that
was
research.
minimum 4,000.
Okay.
To do it through the state was about 4,000.
Wow.
So
And that's not
10
even the private.
times. Yeah, private in Washington was
40,000 or
40,000. It was stupid amount. Yeah, here we go. Private adoption DYCF was 4,000 to 40,000. Independent was 8,000 to 40,000.
Okay.
So
with that said, let's get that one off the table, because that was always, for me, it was something that I always imagined. It's like, well, okay, it costs about $10,000-$20,000 to bring a child into this world if you have to go to the hospital, if you're not going to do a midwife, which I would recommend you do a hybrid if you can. Like if you don't have a complicated pregnancy and you can do a midwife.
midwife, how many wives does this guy have?
If it's a midwife and there's a low wife, you know, yeah, that's that joke is going to degrade faster if I keep going. So with that said, no. So if you have a midwife, you can have a baby for about $8,000 with all of the same provision all the way up until the birth that you would have in hospital. Like the actual hospital birth is very expensive, but being able to go to the hospital if you need to. So that's why I said by a hybrid situation.
Right. But you have Medicare. You have medical coverage that helps take a bunch of that cost. Now, it doesn't take all of it. This is going to be an interesting day, y'all. It doesn't take all of it, but it helps cover a lot of that.
Folks, he's not on his medication today.
But so hopefully it's inexpensive to bring a child into this world. But then the point of all of that is it costs more. It used to cost more to adopt than it did to actually have your own child. And then that child's your own child. And you don't have to deal with all of the baggage that the child comes with.
Because when you adopt, you have follow-ups.
Yeah.
There are always follow-ups. And you're always going to deal with issues of, is this really your child?
Correct.
You're always going to deal with, do you have, even they're going to deal with, what's your family medical history? Right?
Well, who cares if it's your child or not, man? I raised, 5 stepkids, and I raised them just like they were my own children. I didn't care if they were my kids or if they were my wife's kids. I didn't care.
You bring up a really good point. When you talk to anyone who's adopted, you don't talk about my child or the adopted kid. If you do differentiate, you say the biological children or my adoptive children.
Yes.
But it's always my kids.
It's always my kids.
Right? And that is a good adopted parent. But we want to talk costs here real quick. Let's look at international. International, it is very hard to determine how much it costs because you've got legal fees, you've got the American fees. You're looking at $20,000 to $40,000. On top of that, if you go to places, the place I have the most experience with is Ukraine. If you go to Ukraine, you have to bribe judges. You have to bribe the government. They literally tell you to come in hand with about $20,000 worth of cash just for bribing.
10% to the big guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to how much does it cost internationally,
we had
who knows?
We had a church family at our church that went internationally and adopted 2 girls that were sisters from China that were here when they were babies, and they were when they were here, they were teenagers.
I remember.
You remember them?
Yeah. So Steve and I go to the same church, so we know these two gals. It was a very, very special thing.
Yes.
So yeah,
very musically inclined, both of them.
Adoption can be a beautiful, beautiful thing. It can also be, there's some pitfalls, and we'll talk about them more in a moment. But before we do, I do want to go to there's another really happy, good, feel good story here. And I want to pull this up from, this is from NBC News, or the Peacock. It's from the Peacock. There you go. Go ahead and pull that up. Make sure they can see and read the, there you go. Adoption, not abortion. How the Dobbs decision is affecting adoption in the U.S. Read the story. It's a really sweet story. But can you give us the general overview, Justin?
Yeah. So this girl, I believe she's in her 20s, was having her second kid. And she looked and goes, I can't afford this. I cannot afford a second child. So she looked at abortion. However, the Dobbs, went into effect. She could not get an abortion in the state of Texas. So she had some options. She could leave out of state. She could self-abort. She could, all these different things. And she finally went, I'll put the kid up for adoption. So she had a open adoption with this family, and it went smooth. It went well. She goes, the hardest part is having to actually give up the baby. She goes, and she still struggles to this day with that decision of giving up the baby. And I'm sitting there going, but you were ready to murder that child, right? And this is where that heartfelt story comes in, is that was a child's life saved. To the point where even the mother is sitting there going, I'm so happy I did not go through with this abortion. Because we said adoption, not abortion, as a state. This is why that abortion law is in place.
Exactly.
It's not there for the people who medically need the abortion, or it's already, the child's stillborn, well, we disagree on that.
Ectopic pregnancies aside, you don't, anything like an ectopic pregnancy, you are saving the mother's life. And in doing so, it's not an abortion. It's a ectopic pregnancy. You are flushing the fallopian tubes.
Yeah. So
every single one of those, it's always a lie. It's always a lie that you have to save the mother's life to abort the kid.
But, we have this example of a time where she was told, no, you can't abort just because you can't afford it. She goes, okay, let's go through adoption. And she was extremely happy she did that.
Yep.
How many more lives are going to be saved? I believe that we have had 9,800 more babies than expected this year since the abortion law went into. That's 10,000 lives saved.
Well,
now that's from 2021.
But still, that's huge.
But,
Think about the adoptive parents that could not have children that end up with a child that they never would have had in the first place.
Or even if they could have children.
Happy they are.
Even if they could have children, the fact that they're willing to take on this child who was potentially going to be aborted, or at least not, mama didn't think she could take care of it. So
Right.
What a blessing. But on that note, we do want to come out with adoption, and we want to talk about some of the pitfalls. We're going to talk about some of the legal pitfalls in a moment. But before we do, we were talking about this before, and if I remember, I'll put this in link in the description. There was a testimony from a gal on YouTube. She was talking about her adoption story. And she said something really interesting. And if I could sum it up in the best way I could imagine possible, we were talking about this off air. If you were going to adopt a child, dear listener or viewer, if you were going to adopt a child because you are infertile, stop. If you were going to adopt a child because you lost a child, stop. If you were going to adopt a child because you want kids, but you're not married or whatever, but you want the extra kids, stop. If you want to adopt a child because you want to provide for that child something that they could never have had otherwise, because that child needs an adoptive parent, and you want to provide for this child, not the child that you couldn't have had, not the child that you wanted to have, but for this child, your commitment is to this child. It's not to yourself. Then adopt the child. Mm-hmm. And that's why I say, even though people said, well, the church should, 410,000, fosters in the United States, and the church should adopt all of them. It's like, yes, not everyone's heart is there, though.
Correct.
I always talk about, because I have no empathy towards animals. It's not the way the Lord wired me. People are like, look at this cute dog. And I'm like, meh. Okay. You're not going to get me to like an animal. I always say I don't like any animal that doesn't have this. Yep. That's
Mr. Producer.
Exactly.
Mr. Producer has more animals living at house than people.
Yeah.
You might be a redneck if.
I'm just saying,
Jeff
one
Foxworthy, not me.
Of his dogs looks like a stick of butter.
Been there, done that.
But I have no empathy towards animal, and people always get the Bible says just protect the animal. The Bible says you need to, protect the animals. I'm like, we're the body of Christ. Each part of the body does something different.
Yeah.
The Lord has not placed animals on my heart. You know what? He's placed children on my heart. My heart breaks for the foster and adoptive ministry. It is where I put a lot of my focus for my ministry act. That's not going to be everybody, because there are a lot of people that don't have the patience to deal with a kid who's gone through trauma. Yeah. But that's why we're the body of Christ, and we're not all Christ.
Correct.
Right? We all have our different spots to be. If foster and adoptive is not your spot, do not take this as us saying you're evil, you're the problem. It's not what we're saying. Right? But if it is your heart, if the Lord has placed it on your heart and you're saying no, that's disobedience.
Correct.
Right? This is where we're saying, hey, it's easier than you think. There are more resources than you think. It is cheaper than you think. Stop telling yourself, I can't do it, because if the Lord has put it on your heart, I promise you he'll make a way to do it.
Amen. So on that note, I want to talk about some of the things people miss. So we're going to talk about some of the legal issues, and private adoption has benefits that the public adoption just does not afford you. And there's some serious problems with the public adoption. But if you can overcome those, if you think you can, then that's fine. But before we get to those issues, I do want to talk about some of the stats with children. And Mr. Producer, if you could pull up the stats page, it's looking at the, according to a 2007 National Survey of Adoptive Parents, you have how many kids with special health care needs? 39%.
39% of adopted children have special health care needs, and 26% have moderate to severe health difficulties, as compared to the 19% and 10% in the general population.
So 9% of adopted children ages 2 and older have been ever diagnosed with depression, 26% with ADHD, 15% with behavioral conduct disorder, 4, 10, and 4% in the U.S. population, respectively. So understand something. A lot of these kids, a good transition there, Mr. Producer. A lot of these kids are up for adoption for a reason. And it's not because they're broken, but it might be because they come from broken places. Mm-hmm. And so I want to be really, really cautious here how I say this. I'm not saying if you're adopted that you're broken. That's not what I said. Hold it. Don't take this. But there are more people in that population who are broken because they came from traumatic households. They came from places that are very difficult. So it's important to remember that when you sign on, it's not for you. It's not for you. You are signing on for that child. You are doing something beautiful and self-sacrificial and heroic, but it's for that child. It's not for you.
And it's going to change day to day. I mean, I've worked with foster and ministry kids, foster and adopted ministry, and worked with kids. And we had one event that went horrific. I will tell you, it is the black mark on my perfect ministry record. It's not true. It's not perfect ministry record. Liar! But
snap.
It is. But it is my black mark. It was one of the worst things I ever. It just, everything that could go wrong went wrong. And there was one little girl that was the daughter of my ministry leader, and she had people were making fun of her and all of that, and she went into her shell. I finally started to get her out of the shell, and she was very much like, don't touch me. Now, this is a girl who has hugged me before. We've played games. I've swung her around, and she just went straight to don't touch me, to the point where as we were walking back, I was like, okay, let's keep moving. And I put my hand on her shoulder to kind of push her along, and she went, stop touching me. Right? It changes day to day. Right? It is not easy. And so if you're doing this and you have these expectations of how it's going to go, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah.
Do you have
they're not your biologics.
A stat on how many are adopted that are, say, like babies compared to older kids? I'm sure you do.
Do you want...
While you pull that up.
Yeah.
While you pull that up, remember that these are... To your point, these are not your biologics. These are kids who, for whatever reason, even in the womb, kids actually receive trauma and build trauma. In the womb, people don't understand this. In the Bible, it says, in the womb you formed me and you knit me together, my inmost parts. you actually do hear and see and are stimulated by and affected by the things that are in the womb, let alone if this child is 2 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old, 15 years old. They have gone through a set of processes. For whatever reason, they've lost their parents, whether they are dead or whether they are in a institution for wrongdoing. They've lost their parents. And so you've got to remember that there's a lot going on with adopted kids, and you just got to be sensitive for that. Are you getting close there?
Well, 9 times out of 10, I can pull up what's on my laptop on my iPad, and it's not letting me. I have most of the numbers for Washington State. 3-year-olds, the percentage is 10.7% of the adoptions are 3-year-olds.
Why are we doing this on a woke state like Washington?
Because that's what I have. I didn't take a screenshot of the Texas one.
Okay.
I will say Texas, the percentages by age don't differ much. The percentages overall differ greatly. The foster to adoption in Washington is about 24%. In Texas, it's about 52%.
You know, what's interesting, I listened to all of these percentages, and I think about what you said about how we don't need to listen to percentages because they're not
Always truthful.
Truthful, but from one of the last podcasts that we had, how they're like, you know.
Yeah, and the big one is when you look at, a increase percentage wise,
especially from government agencies.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so, however, looking at the percentages, because that's what I have, 3-year-olds is 10.7%, 4-year-olds is 7.3%, 5-year-olds 7.6%, and it goes down. 8-year-olds is 3.8%, 13-year-olds is 2.7%, 17-year-olds is 1.9%, right? And so the older you get, the lower it goes. Okay, so that means we've got, so that would be, I believe 2-year-olds was 12%, 1-year-olds was 15%, and newborns was an unregistered number because of the, independent. Right. So it really is. People choose to adopt younger because what they want to do is they want to have that full family experience. And I get it. Don't get me wrong. Well, I'm a single man who loves working with kids. And one day I hope to adopt.
Yeah.
Right? And I would love to have the full family experience of raising a child from a baby. But I also look and go, there's a bunch of 13-year-olds. There's a bunch of 10-year-olds who are there who aren't getting adopted because people go into it going, I want the full experience. And they're doing it for themselves. Now, does that mean it's bad to adopt babies? No.
Well, they also want to avoid the trauma, and that's something that's really important. So I'll bring that up, and that's something that you're going to have to decide between you and God, but you do. I will put this in the description. I don't have this in there, but I have this one stat. This is from a survey of parents who adopted from foster. Okay, so I don't have this in the show map here, but 44% believe that their child was physically abused before they got to them. 21% believe that their child was sexually abused. By the way, that comports with the government stats of 25 are indeed abused in the foster system. These are people who have adopted their kids, and they've talked to their kids now, and their kids are coming out and they're saying, this is what happened to me before I got to you. They're doing it to the public
years, by the way.
And yes. I do not believe the 25%. I believe it's probably
it might be higher.
Personally,
59% neglect. 73% prenatal drug or alcohol exposure. Okay, mama is saucing while
59% is low. As of 2021 in the state of Texas, neglect was at 86.1% of
these are
adopted kids were previously neglected.
This is true. Wow. This is what parents are adopting parents out of the foster care are saying. And 50% are they claim emotional abuse. And again, I'm not saying that one way or the other, that's what these parents are reporting, what their kids have elucidated to them. So with that said, understand that you have a 50% chance of, when you adopt, getting to pour into the life of someone who was emotionally abused. You have a 44% chance of dealing with a child who was physically abused. By the way, if I have a kid who was strongly physically abused, I'm a big believer in corporal punishment. I'm going to have a hard time figuring out how to go about that. That may not be on the table.
No, it would not be on the table.
If the previous parent beat the living daylights out of a child, I don't know if there's a way in God's green earth that I could ever be able to do corporal punishment. So I want you to know what you're getting into if you adopt. That's now, it's like, I have to figure out something else on how to structure this child's life. And that's something that is part of my upbringing. I understand corporal punishment, and usually for me, I had like less than 30 spankings. Let's say corporal punishment. Less than 30 spankings.
I wish that's all I had.
But the bulk of them, Steve, 20 of them or so were before I was the age of 3. And they were spankings. They were, like pats on the bum. Parents got really onto it early on. As soon as they knew that I knew what I was doing, they were like, shh. That is the type of corporal punishment that I'm used to. So, but when I say that, I'm saying very, very lightly. But now you have a situation when you're in an adoptive situation with a 9-year-old. They're almost past that age where corporal punishment's even valuable. And if you do corporal punishment, you are probably going to lose any connection with the child that you could have had. It's going to destroy that. So know that when you're adopting.
Yeah.
Man, I got them at school.
You got your beatings at school.
I got.
Yeah, they don't let them do that anymore.
Man.
Something psychological damage, emotional damage. We need to put that on the soundboard.
Yes,
man. No, I don't think so.
But
I don't agree with that.
Well, okay.
Seattle, Texas.
We got Seattle, Texas, different generations. I don't think we're going to agree on this one at all.
No, I don't think so either.
But I do want to go back. And we were talking about the percentages and trusting them, and I lied with data on accident. My 86% is of the maltreated types of child victim percentages. So that's 86% of the 54%.
There you go.
So it's 86% of the 65,000 children that were maltreated type child victim, right?
Okay.
So I just wanted to correct that number because I did exactly what I said we need to be careful not to do.
I'm glad you caught it. And you did it while you were interrupting me, reading me. If you just read it a little bit more.
I know, right? I would have just been patient.
Be patient.
Man.
I know, but hey, it's a good thing. We're fired up.
That's okay.
It's a good topic.
Yeah.
So just remember that when you are working with a foster, or if you get the chance to go to an adoption, especially if you get a chance to go to an adoption, if it's not a private and you're working with someone who was a foster kid, understand that there's a high likelihood that this child has endured some significant abuse, that they have gone through a lot, and it's going to change how you go about parenting. And it's not a bad thing. It's just a different thing. It's a thing that you have to be aware of.
And abuse looks different too.
Correct.
Right? To a kid who has never been abused, a spanking doesn't look like abuse. It looks like discipline.
Yeah.
To a kid who has been abused, it looks like abuse. Yeah, because they know the original intent behind the beating. They aren't going to see your heart or intent behind yours.
Sure.
Right? And that's what it's going to come down to. If we actually, producer, if you can pull up I think it was the next story we had, which was the woman who abused the 6 children.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is part of the issue of she probably had this idea of corporal punishment, but I mean, she went way above and beyond. I mean, the kid.
There's corporal punishment and there's abuse.
And then there's abuse. This is straight up abuse. But there are times where corporal punishment can start to look like this to the kid. Mm-hmm. But this here is a bad person who adopted. A bad guy got to adopt.
Correct.
Right? And if you read that, I can't read that from here, but it says the children talked about being hit, being spit on, their head being shaved, being kicked, being, all these things. She had 6 adopted kids. 6 of them that she did this to. How do you get to adopt 6 times like that?
And then you're that person.
Yeah.
So let me be really careful here, and I want to actually lay out what corporal punishment is. What is corporal punishment? So when people hear you spank your child, people get very concerned. Everyone gets upset. Spanking your child is you go for a utensil that is specifically made for or selected for that purpose, and you go and you give a very small tap to a small child, and it is just enough to tingle the bum. That is corporal punishment. That is, if it doesn't leave a mark in 2 minutes, it is corporal punishment. If it has gone any further than that, it's abuse. Corporal punishment, corporal punishment cannot be done in anger either. If you were angry, so when we say we advocate corporal punishment here, if you are angry, do not touch your child. Walk away for 10 minutes. Come back, stay in your room. I want you to lay face down on your bed. You can't play, you can't touch. I'm going to go sit down in the other room, and I'm going to talk to mommy, or I'm going to talk to daddy. And then you come back when you're level-headed, and then you mete out punishment. But do not touch your child when you're mad.
It needs to be discipline, not punishment.
Correct. It's not revenge.
Right? It's not a you did this, so you're getting punished. It's you did this. This is how I'm going to discipline you to not do it again.
It's restorative.
There is yes. Thank you. That is a good way to put that.
So my dad. So I've experienced a couple of different slices of this, and my dad, when he did very well. My dad would say, "Okay, you're gonna go to your room. You're gonna lay face down. Mom and I are gonna come in, and we're gonna give you the spanking." And then afterward, it was always, "Do you want to go get a smoothie? We're gonna go make a smoothie. This is done. We're never gonna talk about this again." That was corporal punishment. So it was a cathartic thing. Like the few times that I had it that I can remember, we would literally go and blend, strawberry banana milkshake afterwards.
Oh, I want a strawberry banana
milkshake. Yeah, and I literally came home from school once or twice, and I said, "Mom, Dad, I need a spanking." "What did you do?" Blah, blah, blah. "Okay, it sounds like you do. Sounds like you really do deserve it." One time I begged for Dad to pull over and spank me on the way home from school. That's what corporal punishment looks like.
Because you might have some other issues happening here.
No, I don't know. I think there's an issue there.
Here's the
John Arthur.
We're agreeing on this, so I don't know.
Here's the issue.
I think
if you committed, no, seriously, it's a serious subject. If you committed wrong and you want to be forgiven and you want the catharsis of forgiveness, and you connote that with the spanking, the corporal punishment has been good. If you did something wrong, that was a bad thing, you say, "I want to be forgiven."
I'm going to have to process that. I'm not sure I totally agree with that.
Process it for a moment. I know you don't like spankings.
I'm not a huge fan of them. I do think they have their place.
So as a child, I wanted to be forgiven.
Right.
And that was always noted. The aftermath was always noted with forgiveness.
Okay, so let me ask you this. At what point, at what age did you finally start accepting forgiveness without being spanked?
Without punishment or without restitution, being able to make, dude, I don't accept forgiveness until there's been repentance on my part and restitution. It bugs me. If I've done something, if I've actually wronged you, it bugs me until I've done something to help restore as much as possible.
Okay, so that there is where I see part of the issue. I believe that probably came from the idea of you're not forgiven until you're spanked, which is how you as a child linked
I
it.
see a problem here.
Right, and I go, you can't do anything to earn the forgiveness God gives you.
Exactly. I know.
That's why it's called grace.
But Christ was punished, in that knowledge of Christ being punished is what lets me sleep at night.
Okay.
We're going to have a corporal punishment podcast.
We might have to have one because I'm not entirely sure I agree with you on this.
Should Christians be involved in corporal punishment. That'd be a good podcast. I think we'll do that.
Okay.
Back onto adoption.
That sounds good. I definitely got to be on that.
Yeah, you should.
Definitely.
So, with that said, there is a difference, though. There is a difference in wherever we square up as a group. It's clear if you are hurting your children, that is not discipline. That is abuse. So that's something that I think people really get lost on.
So on the Texas adoptive system webpage.
Okay, go ahead.
I suffer from short and long-term memory loss, so words.
And midterm too.
Yeah, sometimes.
Is that being hit in the head too many times or something?
It's that corporal punishment.
No wonder he doesn't like it.
Yeah.
Come on, man.
They have the responsibility of adoptive families, and one of the things they call is provide for children's emotional, mental, physical, social, educational, and cultural needs according to each child's developmental age and growth. Now, the developmental age is different for an adoptive child than it is for a non-adoptive child. An adoptive child at 6 years old is not developmentally at 6 years old 90% of the time. That was 90% was a made-up statistic, to be fair.
Got it.
That was my own thing. But I can tell you that most of the time they are not at the same developmental age because there are developmental blockers that occur because of abuse and things like that. Right. So when it's saying here at each child's developmental age and growth, when you look at how do I treat my kid, how do I raise my kid, how do I raise my adoptive kid, you have to treat them differently because of those blockers that happened when they were younger.
Well, when you have children, you realize each child is different and you have to raise, just because, say, your first child, you may have to give that child corporal punishment for who knows what reasons when they're young. Your second child, you may never have to lay a hand on them or any kind of corporal punishment whatsoever. All kids are different. You can have, we raised 7 kids. None of them were the same being raised. You had to deal with them all separately. There was no way you could deal with any of them the same. 7 kids, 5 boys. Come on, man.
You want to talk about someone who's all for corporal punishment? Come on, man.
He found it.
Whoa.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you inputting there because you're the only one here who's had kids.
This is true.
I'm going all off of theory and my experience with working with kids, but I don't live with kids.
And
Steve does.
You raise them all differently. There is no way that you can look at each one of them the same and raise them the same. Each one of them have their own taste, flavors, everything. Everything is all different on each one of them. It doesn't matter what it is.
Kind of goes against the materialistic monist idea that we're all just matter kind of reacting. Because if you get the exact same stimulus, you would think the little brains would work the same. It's like it's almost like they have souls.
It doesn't.
Different creature.
Amazing.
But this pulls into the idea of what's lacking in the adoptive care. Right? Yeah. And adoptive care, once again, is resources and trainings. Yep. In order to adopt, you have to take so many classes, like so many hours. To foster, it's like 20 hours a year of continuing education.
Yeah.
Right? To adopt, you do have to go through and prove some things and take a few courses. But after that, where are the resources? And that's where the church can really come step in. Having a foster and adoptive support group where you can just talk to other parents who have gone through it while your kid is off with a trusted group of adults who might be being taught their own things, right? Or even if it's just a safe place to hang out, right? But the parents need to be able to learn and get this continuing education that the government, once kids are adopted, they do check-ins every once in a while. But after that, they don't give a rip. They're off their plate. They don't care about the adoptive family. I think the government needs to provide more resources and more follow-up trainings for adoptive families. Now, I don't think it should stop somebody from adopting, right? I don't think it needs to be a prerequisite, but I think they need to provide cash, money, opportunities for these families to go and get continuing education on adopting.
That's where I think some of that I agree with, but I think that's where you and I disagree somewhat. I would like the government to get more out of adoption to the point where if you have someone who's doing something to a child, prosecute them. And you have to establish like a deterrence, right? You have to establish whether they're adopted or whether they're their actual child. You have to have a deterrence. Otherwise, you have a situation like the Turpin family. And if you can go ahead and pull that up, Mr. Producer, it's the last one. And go ahead and full screen that and play it then, please. Because this is a really, really sad story. It doesn't matter if you're adopted or not, or in foster or not.
This is 911. Do you have an emergency?
I'm not getting any audio. You getting audio?
I just ran away from home.
This was the call for help that set them free. The 13 children in California who had to be rescued by police. Nearly all of them were tortured and kept as prisoners by their own parents, who are now sitting in prison serving 25 years to life.
I just ran away from home.
Just ran away from home because
I live in a family of 15.
Oh, it is good.
Okay. Can you hear me? And we have abusing parents. Did you hear that?
But this morning, more than 4 years later, some of these same children are now suing their county and a private foster care agency who they say failed to protect them after law enforcement officers removed them from the nightmare that was their home. In a new lawsuit, attorneys for the 6 youngest children of the Turpin family say that the foster family, who was paid to raise them after they were rescued, was also abusive.
It's not only shocking, it should make everyone angry, because these children who were chained to their beds for a great majority of their life finally are freed, right? And then the county places them with ChildNet and puts them in another position where they are further abused.
ChildNet is a private foster care agency contracted by Riverside County east of Los Angeles. And in their lawsuit, the children say that the agency placed them in a home where they say the company knew that other foster care children who had spent time in that home had been abused. They accused the former foster parents and their daughter of hitting them in the face with sandals, pulling their hair, hitting them with a belt, and striking their heads. Some of them accused their former foster father of sexual abuse, and they say both foster parents would tell them that they were worthless and would encourage them to harm themselves.
And while the kids were being abused further, the county closed their eyes.
I have anger.
This case is one where the entire world was watching, and yet even in that situation, the county and ChildNet dropped the ball, which tells you, I think, pretty clearly what must be happening and what we've seen happen in other cases.
That's them.
With kids who aren't famous, whose cases are not high profile, who nobody knows about.
It was a case of abuse and neglect in America in 2018 that broke hearts around the world.
They pull our hair. They yank out our hair. I have my two little sisters right now are chained up. Okay, how old are you? I'm 17. What's your name? Jordan Turpin.
In an emotional interview last November, Jordan Turpin first shared this story with ABC News anchor Diane Sawyer.
Like she's 8.
I don't know how you had the courage, never having spoken to anyone like that.
I think it was like us coming so close to death so many times. And I was worried about my siblings, and when I saw them crying and worried, I just felt like I had to do it. I just wanted to do it. I wanted to help everyone.
According to the attorneys, the abuse in the foster home went on for 3 years until one of the children was old enough to leave and then told this story to a social worker. The 3 former foster family members are now facing more than a dozen criminal charges, including child abuse, neglect, and sexual assault. They've pled not guilty.
Oh,
a county
plead
spokeswoman
not
tells
guilty.
us they've not seen the lawsuit, so they have no comment. We've reached out to ChildNet and did not get a response. But last year, a spokesperson for the foster care agency told ABC News that they could not comment specifically on the Turpin case because of confidentiality laws, but said, we take our work very seriously, including the extensive vetting of parents.
Oh.
The children are suing for damages, but their lawsuit at this point doesn't say for how much.
I can't even tell you how many times our clients have told us, we just don't want this to happen to someone else.
My land.
Okay, so go ahead and make sure you exit out of that before the next ad comes along, huh? With that said,
you were so close.
You were so close. That said, here's the issue. The reason we bring that up is it doesn't matter whether it's your parents. It doesn't matter if it's the fosters. It doesn't matter if it's the adoptive parents. There has to be consequences and a deterrent. And frankly, the people who were chaining up little girls, like, when do you not say this person's a monster? They have lost the right to breathe air.
Apparently when you're California.
So
was it California?
Yeah, it was California.
Wow, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah,
so that's the question. That's the question. And so that's where I say it's not about adoptive training or this governmental. It's you have to have a deterrence. And maybe you do check in on these people, right? You ask the kids questions. I'm all for that. But what I don't think it does is I don't think it's as useful as having a deterrence and a proper
I think we were solving
justice.
two different problems. My problem was the lack of knowledge to how to raise an adoptive kids. You're dealing with the
abuse.
There are adoptive kids being abused. How do we stop that?
Do they even do?
I think part of the abuse can be lack of knowledge, but stories like that's not lack of knowledge. That's lack of a soul.
Do they even do background checks on these people?
They do. And depending on the state is depending on the level of background check. But it's very easy to pass a background check.
Yeah,
because they don't talk to references.
So all that to say, we're not ratting on the adoption system at all. Rather, we're saying that there's a need. There's a need for good people who are willing to take that on to either foster or adopt. So if you think that you could be that person, give it a consideration. Closing thoughts for the day.
Sorry, that last story shook me a bit. I'm not going to lie to you. I didn't watch that one before.
It's rough. Yeah, I didn't see that.
So, philosophy of adoption. I am pro-adoption. You know what? And if you're single, I'm a single guy. My life mentor was a single guy and adopted. It can be done. Okay, don't stop yourself going, but they deserve a mother and a father. Man, they will take one parent over no parents. I promise you that. Our philosophy on adoption has to be for the kid, not for me, not for you, not for the church, or I'm going to sneeze. Okay, there we go. Edit that out. But it can't be for you or for me. It has to be for the kid. And when you adopt for the kid and you think about the kid as you're adopting and raising and loving that child as an individual child, that's when adoption works. And if you can do that, if you think you can do it, start looking into it. Start doing some trainings, getting connected with some groups. Look into adoption. I think it is one of the best things and one of the most biblical things we can do.
Absolutely. And if you're called to it, do it.
Yeah, there's some things I agree with you on that, Justin. Excuse me. You know, I am not for abortion, and I'm pro-adoption. I've got, a cousin that's been adopted, and she is such a wonderful person. She's a grandmother now, and she is definitely pro-adoption herself, and just absolutely a wonderful person. And, you know, was accepted like she's just was
part of the family.
Just part of the family. Never was thought of as being adopted. Never, ever. And, you know, and it's not about being adopted. It's about being a part of the family. And, you know, it's about the life of the child, and it's about the child, like you said, it's about raising that child. And it's not for you, it's about the child. And, you know, we have to consider that Jesus Christ, like John Arthur had talked about, he knew us before we were born. And we have to consider that, you know, we need to take these children, and I wasn't saved till I was 48, which is a late time in my life, but it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. And I work on my family on getting into the church and getting their kids into church, because I see it as the most important thing in their life. And that should be a very, very important part of what the church should do, and offer training type of seminars for people who do adoption.
Yeah.
And they should have some kind of ministry available in the church for adoptive parents.
Absolutely.
And, you know, that allows them to be able to come to the church and come into the church and bring their children and learn training, so that the child itself can either be in an environment with those that are like in a classroom, and then have the parents in a classroom themselves, where we have people that are training these people that's on a weekly basis and available for these people, so that the church offers something like that.
Biblical training and discipleship is key.
Yes.
And so from the Shared Theology, just to finish up the thoughts for the day, biblical discipleship is key. And by the way, some people have started to bristle with the word discipleship since the advent of the whole church growth movement. Okay. It's okay, Mr. Producer. Go ahead. It's okay. Since the church growth movement has kind of messed up that word, let me say it this way. Pour into the life of those around you who are adopting. And if you want to adopt, find a mentor. Find someone who is going to spend the time with you, and know this, that God has called the church to be a body. And that means that we need to help those who are in our midst, who are struggling. So make sure that you support your families who are adopting. And if you can adopt, consider it. Consider if it's God's leading for you, okay? Not everyone's called to adopt. But see if you can. And if it's something that God has led you to, make sure you're faithful to do whatever God has told you to do. And remember, you're not adopting for yourself. You're adopting for the Lord, ultimately. And in doing so, you're serving this child. Keep that in mind if you ever do. With that said, if you like this podcast, like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thank you so much for over 200,000 downloads of the podcast. Apple is now deleting listens, and it looks like actually episodes.
Ooh, wow.
So I'm not sure what's going on. It's no bueno. Es muy malo. But YouTube deleting views. Okay, so someone likes us. Someone likes us.
Yes.
That's okay. God loves us. So with that said, like, comment, share, subscribe. Make sure if you want to watch somewhere that doesn't delete it. Apparently Rumble looks pretty good. Thank you for those of you who are subscribing there. You can find us at Further Every Day on the Twitter. And with that said, got nothing else for you. You have a wonderful day. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, if you're still here, yeah, I even got Mr. Producer that time. He was going for the stop record.
For that button.
Okay.
Sitting there all innocent looking.
Oh my gosh.
Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Come on, man.
Today we're going to ask, what is your favorite color?
Ooh.
Just really generic.
Mine is a royal purple.
You would like a peridot, wouldn't you?
A pair of what?
Peridot. Purple. It's like a dark royal purple.
Yeah. I like the pair of those then.
There you go.
That color actually comes out of a shellfish.
Peridot?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not shellfish about it.
I'm not shellfish about it.
Good job.
Actually. But mine is a green, actually.
You like green?
Yes, I do.
wonder why.
Well, is it like a forest green, a bright green, a lime green, a seafoam green?
He's an OD green, forest green guy.
Forested.
What's the hex
camo
code?
green. See, I'll see my green.
Sky blue or OD green, depending upon what it is. If it's a car, I would like a sky blue hot and fast car. That would be so cool.
I would like you to have one.
That would be nice.
I've never been really a blue fan unless it's jeans.
Yep. Sounds about right. Tell us in the comment section down below what your favorite color is, and hope you have a blessed week. We love you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.